Right, discuss.
It was a bit of a sucker punch.
A sucker punch?
Yeah, a proper in the gut, wow moment.
Do you think so?
Of how easily we can be distracted, which we are all very much guilty of at some time or another, because it's the easy option. And it's the easy way to just get on with it. And it really made us just go, yeah, I'm so guilty of doing that sometimes.
Mm.
I thought using the temptations was just, it was just astounding. I think I'd never thought of it that way. We always see those temptations as, I think I've always seen Jesus as taking the high ground in those temptations. And I think what you brought out of it was this was not taking the low ground, but in a sense of the grounding of his incarnation. So just been baptized, goes out into the desert, gets tempted, and almost the devil saying, are you really going to do this then? Jesus goes, yeah, I really am.
I think what's interesting, I didn't have time to bring this out, but I was going to sort of bring this out, is if you look in Luke 4, the passage after that passage about the temptation is Jesus's, when he was in the synagogue in Nazareth in Galilee, and when he took up the scroll, and he wrote that, and he read that passage from Isaiah, which then caused such consternation to his fellow men in the synagogue that Saturday, about what his ministry was about, and you just think he came straight out of those temptations to be excarnate, if you like, rather than incarnate, and went straight into that proclamation of the kingdom, which was just like mind blowing, really. If you want to proclaim the kingdom, you got to be in the right mindset. Now, I thought it was quite frightening, actually. As I went through it and started looking at that whole idea of being excarnate, what really frightened me is that anthropologists and sociologists see this, but we in the church don't. And I think that is frightening.
Yeah.
Yeah, we truly believe that we are Christians and we're saved and we don't need to do anything else. But you still think about things that shouldn't be done, but you still do it. It's very difficult. Yeah, I'm Christian, but
this definition by Charles Taylor about what excarnation is, it's about living the spiritual life in the head. That's what excarnation is. Suddenly it's lost its bodily form, and therefore we forget to do things. Everything's in your head, so your worship is in your head. You're trying to get your sermon, intellectually understand a sermon, but you forget about the practical things of generosity and being a servant and washing people's feet and doing things out of compassion and speaking kindnesses rather than objectifying people. Because if we get into this language of us and them, that's excarnation. There is no us and them in incarnation. It's community. And again, it's just getting into these habits of changing the way we live our lives bodily, and thinking, actually thinking, hold on, is that an incarnational act I've just done there? Have I said something there? Have I done something there which actually is an act of community and an act of love? Or have I done something that is the opposite? And it's getting into that. John and I have been discussing about an act of discipleship where you don't argue with people. Where you can explain, I don't think that's quite right. I think this is the way it should be, but just don't argue. And because that comes from this idea that arguing never changes anybody's mind.
Never.
So just surrender. Just surrender and say, fine. And then just love them and demonstrate Jesus' love to them through your act rather than arguing. And you say, well, you're being a doormat. Fine. Be a doormat for Jesus.
Yeah.
But what it touched me as well is when Martin was mentioned, look, it looks like that Jesus is vulnerable, but it is not, is so certain the way he's doing because it's the Father will, that it makes it really, he is God. By the way, is so vulnerable to, the devil to try to reach him in some ways. Again, it comes together as the Trinity. He knows the past and the future. So, and that is really astonishing, isn't it? How vulnerable we have to become to be transformed in our own lives, and be so much incarnate,
Yeah.
and so much together to find out, isn't it?
I think you've picked up on something there, though, Sergio. One of the words that I kept thinking and going back to all the way through was about transformation. And you really touched on it at the end, and talking about nobody being left behind, everybody doing this together because that's what you should be doing, and how much. And we do take that easy path because it is so easy, because then you don't have to change anything. But actually, transforming what we're doing, how we think, and everything about our lives is what we should be doing to be truly incarnate. And that it was at that point where I was like, yeah, this is when, we've got the perfect opportunity right now, haven't we, where things have been so different and things have changed massively. So let's keep going with this change while we can, because it's exciting for starters, but actually how much more can we grow as people because of it and become better because of it? And that's huge, that's massive. And
you didn't really mention the community task stuff, which I thought you were going to do, going back, but that is the community task stuff as well. It says we get embroiled with each other
exactly
in community and do the hard yards together. That's when the transformation happens for us and for others who are watching on us.
But that's where the connection comes between what you said last week, John, and what I was saying here. Because ultimately, I suppose the response from what I said was, oh well, that's it then. I might as well just give up. What's the point? I can't win here. But the first step of discipleship is being aware of the influences that are the temptations which are pulling you away from Jesus. And that temptation to pull you away is counteracted by being in community, because it's as you actually have that communion that you talked about last week, that common union, and as you grow that community tasks, that common purpose that you have together, and that you get community, that's how it grows, and it's community together, it's being together which keeps you close to Jesus. And that's where the whole irony comes in. You think, oh well, if you go apart and do my spiritual thing on my own, then I'll be closer to Jesus. But the reality is, you get close to Jesus by being in community, not on your own. Because
I don't find that ironic. I find it beautiful.
I know it is beautiful, but it's the opposite way than our minds. Our ex-carnate minds don't work that way.
So what was the point of Jesus? Was to go into the people, to commune with the people, and help them with anything that was bad. They could transform themselves into better human beings, right? But that transformation, it comes from incarnation, from you. There we go. We're getting there. We're getting there. This is really the pillars of basis love with God, isn't it? Communication.
I was just listening to a podcast before, and the guy was mentioning the Greek word ochlos, which just means crowd, but it doesn't mean crowd. It means like dirty rabble. And he was talking about when when Jesus approached to heal Jairus' daughter, basically, so I think it's in Mark says, and he's in with the ochlos. So basically, Jesus at this point is unclean because he's with the unwashed masses. And then to top it all, just as he's about to go and kind of heal the 12-year-old virgin daughter of a religious leader, the highest of the higher, the purest of the pure, an hemorrhaging woman comes and touches him, the lowest of the low, even more unclean, than a dead animal. A hemorrhaging woman touches him. So not only is he in this dirty crowd, he gets touched by the most unclean being anywhere, and he stops, and the girl dies. But he stops to give something to the most unclean person in that society, but then goes on to heal the cleanest person when he goes to the daughter's bedside. And it's just like Jesus came to the least of us, and we know it, we say it, but can we actually grasp it? And there's a certain amount of hubris, I think, when we become Christians, because we forget that was us.
Yeah,
we forget that was us, that we were the lowest, and we kind of start thinking ourselves as something special because Jesus has touched us. And I think sometimes it's where that humility comes to just, we need to get back with the crowd sometimes and just say, actually, if Jesus came to me, he can come to anybody.
You've done it again, John. You've started preaching my sermon from 2 weeks' time.
All right, okay.
Because ultimately, we'll be discussing. I can't wait to discuss Sergio's generosity sermon next week. But after that, when we look at service, the only way we can look at service after looking at community and incarnate and generosity, the place to start looking at service is by looking at grace. Because you can't start to look at what it means to serve if you can't understand what you've been forgiven from. And we forget that. We so easily forget where we've come from.
But do you think that's the externality as well, though? In the sense that we build a pedestal for ourselves and we stand there, but in the sense of when we start building ourselves up, you were talking about the mind and the body, you start to elevate yourself into something special. We started this conversation, which probably isn't on the recording, where somebody's saying, oh, you're the intellectual ones. And it's like, we've read a few books, we kind of give away our incarnation, our bodiliness to try and aspire to be God, when actually from the Philippians bit, what God did was reach down and become human. So we can kind of meet God here in this fleshiness, because that's what he wants, because we're going to then be the body of Christ. We're then going to be the body of Christ as the church to take on that message. So we're going to get to Jesus at some point. That's great. Oh, yeah. Just trust in that. For now, we're here, flesh, blood. Let's go and meet other fleshy things and kind of pass on the good news.
Yeah.
And this is where the no one gets left behind comes in, isn't it? This is where that bit just kind of does that. And, we shouldn't be leaving anybody behind. We shouldn't be keeping it to ourselves. We shouldn't be closing those doors on a Sunday and going, sorry, if name's not down, you're not coming in, you've not been here before. No, we should be not leaving a single soul behind and going, right, come on, let's go out there, let's do other stuff. Let's show that actually us Christians can be pretty normal and can do other things that brings everybody along with us.
Because this young man, Sergio, I had a real revelation about that not so long back. Because I always used to have a problem with explaining how, this idea about putting on the mind of Christ. What does that mean? Looking at things through Jesus' eyes. And Sergio explained not so long back that he, when we first met, Sergio came to the UK. Let's be honest, Sergio, you struggled speaking English. You did.
Yes.
And we communicated by hand language, and we communicated basically through Sonia. That's how we communicate. And, bless him, this servant of a man came and did so many things with me where he just blessed me. But slowly over time, he learned English. And he said to me, what really helped me to really, transform and to really step up in my English is when I realized I had to start thinking in English. Yes. And once I started to think in English, then I started really moving on with my English language. And that occurred to me, that's exactly the same with our Christian walk. We've got to start, we've got to think in a different language. We've got to change from the language of this world, or the language that is excarnate, if you like, now using a new word, and start to think in an excarnate way, think the same way that Jesus thought. And it's like a different language. We've got to learn. We've just got to, if we want to learn the language of discipleship, we've got to make that change.
When I said I need to start thinking in English to understand a different world, completely different world, my problem was just one. I kept translating from English to Portuguese and go back. And I think that's what the point hits, because when you translate, always something is lost. Always. When I didn't speak any English, right? It was my actions that made the difference.
You know, brother,
I didn't
I
argue with anybody.
can absolutely say that it was your actions which made the difference. I can absolutely say that because the demonstration of your willingness to serve and willingness to, you know, to surrender and actually be very humble in the fact that you look, I've just come here, I need to do things to fit in, and to actually serve was phenomenal, actually. So it shows the importance, all of this shows the importance of discipleship practice.
Mhm.
Again, one of the things that John and I have been trying to demonstrate through what we're doing together, you know, if we're going to truly lead the church towards a way of discipleship, then we must first demonstrate discipleship. And if we're not willing to do it, if it's not changing our lives, then how can we ask others to do the same?
And we're not saying that we're perfect in the sense that
way.
it's actually in the sense of, you know, it might mean that we have to go and apologize to some people. We may need to humble ourselves in that, because it's not we're saying that we're perfect. It's just a sense of we can't say to people, you've got to be transformed without being transformed. You know, we're seeking the same transformation.
Yeah, that's the start. John always tells me about, I'd forgotten about this illustration actually, but there's in Lancashire many years ago, there was a really famous evangelist called Gypsy Smith. And he used to, somebody once came to him, so the story goes, somebody once came to him and said, you know, Gypsy Smith, you know, how do we start revival? And he was using a chalkboard in a talk, and he took the piece of chalk that he was using, and he drew a circle around himself, stood inside the circle and said, the transformation starts inside the circle. Revival starts inside the circle.
But from what we've said today, it does start inside the circle. But then in like some glorious Venn diagram for us as a church, it's my circle intersecting with your circle,
to produce community.
Circle, intersecting with Sarah's thing. And it's the picking each other up when we fall down. It's the encouraging each other. And I think one of the things is as well, it's the going back to community. It's the having a relationship with each other so that we actually know what's going on with each other. Not because we want to kind of judge each other, but because we're accountable to each other, and we're loving each other to say we know what we struggle with. We can be confessional with each other to actually, you know, with those people we trust in church, to be able to say, this is what I'm struggling with. This is, and you know, me and Martin have started this a little bit in a relationship where he knows this stuff that I struggle with, and I know this stuff that he struggles with, and therefore we'll contact each other and say, you know, I've done that again, haven't I? And it's not an act of judgment; it's an act of sharing.
I think I'm going to have to change that Gypsy Smith illustration, John, because the way I described it then was completely excarnate.
Right.
Yeah, it's only as you qualified it and brought it in that those circles intersect into community that suddenly it made sense. Yeah, good one.
Well, it does start inside the circle in the sense that it's the admission that discipleship is about us, but it's never about us on our own. It's about us on our own in community.
Well, it comes back to, I think I've been saying a lot recently, because, you know, I think it's true. You know, we're saved out of something personal into something communal. So yeah, our salvation ultimately has to be personal, you know, because sin is personal. Sin is our own personal condemnation, if you like. You know, so it has to come out of that, but it takes us into the body, so it has to become something communal.
It's got to come from that personal point, though, isn't it? Because it goes back to what you were saying at parts in your sermon about, you know, if your worship's just about, if church is just about the worship, then it's just about the worship. If it's just about being amongst other people, but then it doesn't affect the rest of your life, then that's all about you. And it does, yes, there's that bigger picture, but it does have to start in that circle to start with, because if you don't start there, then it's not going to get that next step out. So I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that it's got to start in that circle.
Yeah, it's got to start there, hasn't it? But he can't stop there, can't end there.
Yeah, has
it's
to.
what we said last week about that Trinitarian idea, that kind of, it's looking outward all the time. It's you, but it's outward.
Perichoresis again.
You know, it's that it's relationship.
Yeah.
It's that ownership of it though as well, isn't it?
Yeah, good word.
Because how often do we not own up to it? Because it's easier not to own up to it. And actually there's times, like right at the very beginning when I said it was a sucker punch, because I could sit there and go, yeah, I've done that. Yeah, I've felt like that. And it's that ownership of it. And actually, yeah, own it, move on and transform from it.
Yeah.
And yeah, you might do it again. And that's absolutely fine. We can't be perfect. We cannot be. We are not God. We are not, we are not perfect. We will never be perfect. And the minute that you think you are, then actually you need to go back and start again. But it's that ownership of it and owning what it is to then move on. And you would hope then it has that sort of that rain sort of drip feeding effect where once you've got it, then let's get everybody else in the community onto it. And then it's that not leaving anybody behind and all moving forward together.
A bit like discipleship then.
A bit like
A little bit,
discipleship.
yeah.
I want to ask you all a question. And we should have done this with John last week. And I think we should do it with Sergio next week. What's your takeaway from the sermon?
Wow.
Mine is that if it's easy, then it's not right. Because it's too easy. If it's too easy, we need to be challenging ourselves. And it's very much if it's the easy option, then you need to really think, is it the right option? Because if it's too easy, it's not supposed to be easy. It's not supposed to be the simple way forward. And I think if thinking about what we were saying earlier about translation and thinking the right way, thinking in the way that Jesus would, it's not going to be easy. And I think at times where you think, I've come to God, I love God and I've given my life to him, so it's going to be easy now. It's not. And we really need to think about, is it? If it is easy all the time, and if the things that you do are not that easy, is it always the right thing?
You got any takeaway, Sergio? Any thoughts?
Yeah, for me it was the transformation. The transformation is difficult. It's so difficult because you have to process all the things that happen in your life, and you've been here or you've been there. Which road would you take? Which road did you take? Are you transformed enough in your heart to go in the right road, but you don't know what's the right word because you don't know the future? Okay, if we have enough maturity and understanding that Jesus is there for us to calm down the storm, can you keep yourself into the road, the right road, the right road of transformation and incarnation? That's my thoughts.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's that understanding that, God sought us, God came to seek us out, and God became flesh in order to be able to speak into the lives of human beings and into the world. And therefore, we don't have to go off into our own heady minds and what we can do is simply follow him and be as we are human and flawed and weak, but in his power, because he came down to us. We can find him here now.
Amen.
It's a good finish.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Martin. It was astounding.
Yeah.
Astounding.
Brilliant.
Pretty amazing.